Today's video is going to be me talking about moving across the planet to a different country as a young female without speaking any language of that country, and what was my experience like, how I overcame certain things, how I learned the language, and so on. I think it's a very cool story, and I feel like it will kind of shed a light a little bit on who I am, and you guys get to know a little bit more about me and who I am as a person, and I just thought it's a cool story to share. Let's get started. I moved to United States from Russia about, I don't know, like 12 years ago, something like that. I don't remember. It's been a while. I was a teenage girl and I was going through a lot at that time, and I feel like moving to the United States saved my life. The reason why I say that is because when I was younger, my mom passed away from cancer, and I never properly dealt with that until I was here in the United States. Right after my mom passed away, I started hanging out with a crowd of not so good people that were just bad influence on me. I was skipping school, I started to drink, I started to smoke, and it was just not a good time for me. I didn't know how to cope with that, so I turned to my friends and turned to kind of being a bad person, I guess. Not a bad person, but I was hanging out with a crowd of people who had bad influence on me, and if I were to stick around, I think I would go in a bad path and not be the same person as I am today. When I had a chance to come to United States, I was really excited because I've never been here. So I originally came to Seattle as a tourist, and I was supposed to be here for about 2 weeks, and it was right before the school year started, so when I would go back after 2 weeks, I would go back to school. I was super excited. I felt like it would be a good getaway. I can see how people in other countries live, and even though I've been to a bunch of other countries, I felt like United States was different, and I always wanted to see how it is. When I came to United States, I came to Seattle, I was super happy and excited. It was a whole new experience, as a whole new country. The people are completely different here. Everything is different from Russia. And it was scary and exciting at the same time. And after about a week being in Seattle, I started to think to myself that, you know, it would be kind of cool to live here for a little bit. It would be kind of cool to experience this and see how it goes. And I was kind of battling with myself whether I should stay or go back, because I knew if I go back, I have my family there, I had to go back to school, it's all familiar, and staying over here would be hard because I don't speak the language, I don't know how the culture is. It was scary. It was also very intriguing and exciting, and I really wanted to see if I can do it. After a few days of thinking about it, I started to think about my friends back home and the influence on my future. What would happen if I were to go back and continue hanging out with those people and going down the path I'm already going, and what my future would be like if I were to stay here? Can I build a future here? Can I learn the language? Can I go to school? Can I get a job? How is that all gonna work? Really started thinking about my future, and by the end of 2 weeks, I realized that I do want to stay here and try it out. I really do. So I made a decision to stay. And I remember the day where my flight was supposed to leave, I woke up. After my flight already left, I was scared. I kind of started thinking to myself, what have I done? Will I have a chance to go back? Maybe it's the biggest mistake I've ever done in my life. What's gonna happen? I don't speak the language. I'm not enrolled in school here. How's it all gonna happen? It was very scary. And I think the scariest part of it was me not speaking the language. I've taken English classes when I was in Russia. I've taken English since I think I was in the 2nd grade. So I've taken English for quite a long time, but learning a language in the classroom setting and then never use it outside of the classroom setting, is completely different than coming to a country and trying to speak it. It's a whole different thing. So even though I took English classes back in Russia, when I got here, all of that just kind of went out the window, and I couldn't say a single word besides like hello and how are you. The first thing that came to my mind on that day was, how in the heck am I gonna communicate with other people, and how in the heck am I gonna learn the language? That day I decided that the first thing I have to do is learn at least a little bit of the language. So what I started doing is I started just walking around. I walked around the neighborhoods in downtown Seattle, and I would just listen. You know, I would sit in coffee shops, I would watch TV, I would listen to the radio, I would observe, I would people watch, and kind of try to get as much of it in as possible and try to understand what other people are talking about. That's how I learned the majority of English. It was very hard and it was very scary, but I did it. After that, the next thing, I have to get my high school degree. I have to go to school. Learning all of that was very challenging because I had to get my transcripts from Russia to here, and they have to be translated. I wasn't a citizen. I didn't have a green card. I was on a tourist visa. And how is that going to be possible for me to get into school without any documentation besides my Russian passport? How's that all gonna work? I got my transcripts from my school in Russia, and I got them translated, and I sent all the documents into the local high school that was the closest to the place I was staying at, and I got in. They put me originally in a ESL program, and then from there I transferred into the normal high school program. I graduated after about a year, if not less, and the reason for that is because schools in Russia are a lot more advanced and a lot more strict than here. So by the time I was in 8th grade, I already took physics and chemistry and calculus, where here you don't really take those classes until you hit high school. I graduated high school when I was 16 years old. It felt amazing because when I was in Russia, I was behind because I skipped so many days. I was kind of running behind, and I wasn't even sure if I would be able to graduate high school when I was in Russia. So to me, graduating high school at the age of 16 and accomplishing that felt amazing. I was very proud of myself. At that point, I knew that if I can do this, I can do anything else in the world. Russian culture and American culture are very different. The first thing that comes to my mind, I remember going to other people's houses. In Russia, when you go to somebody's house or you own, you take off your shoes at the door. You don't walk around the house in your shoes. So a lot of people have like slippers, like home slippers that you wear around the house, but a lot of people walk barefoot in the house. So it's just a common thing that Russian people do. And out here in the United States, even though some people do it, it's not as common as in Russia. I remember when I first came over to somebody else's house, I started taking off my shoes, and they're like, no, what are you doing? You don't need to take off your shoes, you just walk in the house like that. And to me, I thought, this is kind of weird because you bring so much dirt from the outside and then you walk around your house spreading that dirt and the dust around. That was very weird for me, so that's something I had to adjust. Another thing that was weird was people smiling and saying hello to you on the streets. In Russia, people just kind of focus on their journey or on their task, and they kind of walk to get to the next place. They don't really look in your eyes, they don't really say hello, and if you do that, people think you're kind of weird or a tourist. And here in the United States, I remember I was walking downtown Seattle and people would look at me in the eyes, and if I would look back, they would say hello, and it happened way more than once. And to me, I thought that was kind of weird. Why all these people saying hello to me? So that's another thing I kind of had to adjust and learn that it's normal here, and if people say hello, just say hello back. It's just kind of weird. It's just kind of weird. And there is still some things to this day, 12 years later, that I find odd or I'm not used to, and I still kind of have to adjust to it. And I think the part of it is because I did grow up in Russia and my Russian ways will never really go away. So I will always find things that are odd to me or that I find different or interesting. And I don't know, I kind of like that. It kind of sets me apart, I feel like. One of the things that I found hard to do when I first moved here was finding friends. When I was back home in Russia, I did have a lot of friends. I knew a lot of people and I had a lot of like different groups of people I hang out with, so I always had somebody by my side. Moving here and not having that was very tough for me. The language barrier made it even harder. One of my very first friends was this Russian girl, Ksenia. She taught me a lot. She taught me everything about American high schools, and she taught me a lot about their culture and how kids interact here. And she also helped me to learn the language. She would speak in English to me sometimes and would translate it to me to Russian so I can understand what's going on. And she also introduced me to all of her friends, which became my friends during the time where I was in school. I was very grateful for that because all of her friends are American kids and they were so welcoming to me. They were teaching me things and they teach me how to say certain things, and they asked me a lot of questions about my home. That made me feel very welcomed. But if I didn't meet Ksenia, I don't know how hard it would have been for me to meet friends. And I think it would be very, very hard because of the language barrier, and the second thing because of the culture. So it's a completely different culture, and the way you meet people here is a little bit different. I feel like the way people interact at first, at least. So let's say if I didn't meet her and all of those friends came up to me and started talking to me, I would be very cautious, because that's not how it happens in Russia. People just don't come up to you randomly and start talking to you and befriend you right away. So I think if Ksenia was in the picture, I would be very cautious of those people and possibly not even befriend them. After I graduated high school, I didn't go to college right away. I think I took a year off and I just started working. By that time, I already moved out of that Russian's latest house, and I was renting a room in the house with 4 other people. So I was living truly on my own for the first time, and I wasn't even 18 at the time. I was still 17, and I remember I got my first job, and it was at the ice cream place at Pike Place Market. They paid me under the table because I wasn't legal at the time. I didn't have my green card yet. I worked 7 days a week, 10 hours a day, and that's how I learned a lot of my English. That's how I learned how to speak English, because I was forced to interact with customers on a daily basis. When I first started speaking English, a lot of my English was ice cream related. I remember people would ask me questions, normal questions about my day, and I would respond in ice cream terms because that's the only thing I knew how to properly say at that time. And then with time, I learned a lot more the language, and I was able to speak normally. At that time, I also got my driver's license. I had a car before I got my driver's license. I bought a car off of the junkyard and I was driving it around, but I didn't have my driver's license yet, because in order to get your driver's license as a teenager, so under you're 18, you need to have a parent or a guardian there, and I didn't have that. So I had to wait until I turned 18 to get my driver's license, but I was driving before that. Another thing that I remember now is how people dress. In Russia, it is not normal to go outside in your sweatpants or your pajama pants. A lot of people will put not nicer clothes, but normal clothes, like jeans and a sweater on when they go outside. People want to look presentable. And I remember here I would go outside, I would go to the coffee shop, I would go to school or to work, and I would see people wearing sweatpants or pajama pants. I remember seeing that and thinking to myself, I was like, why are they doing that? It's kind of weird, because in Russia, you go outside and you see people dressed appropriate for public and appropriate to be outside, and out here it's kind of you can wear pajama pants and nobody would care. To me, that was very weird. Now I'm used to it. Now you'll see me wearing sweatpants outside once in a while. I still try to dress appropriately, but at the same time, the culture out here is fine with wearing sweatpants and pajama pants outside, so I feel like I'm okay with that as well. That's something also that I've noticed that's different, and it was also one of the differences and challenges I had to overcome. I had so many good examples when I was thinking about this video, and now everything just kind of exited my mind. I'm sorry, guys. Overall, my experience with moving in a different country. The country is completely different from my home country. It was very scary and amazing at the same time. I learned a lot. It was a huge change. It took me quite a bit of time to adapt, and I feel like I'm still adapting to this new culture and this new lifestyle. The thing that was the most interesting is the language, because I took English classes when I was in Russia, but once I got here, none of that matter. The best way to learn the language is just to absorb into it and get into that culture. That was probably the hardest part of me moving to United States. What I would suggest if you're planning on moving to a different country, I would suggest reading up about it, about the culture itself, what's normal, what's not normal, and learn a little bit before you get there, because it is going to be different and it's going to take some time to adapt. And I think why it took me a while to adapt and why it was scary for me and confusing at times, because I didn't know anything about United States getting into here. I didn't know a single thing about the culture until I got here. If you have any questions in regards to my experience, if certain things that I said were kind of confusing or didn't make sense, don't forget to leave me comments down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you guys next time.